Hey guys, welcome back to Skin Anarchy. This is Ekta, and today's episode is going to be talking about what it means to have efficacious skincare routines. And I think this is an incredibly important conversation because with all of the products out there, all of the noise, I think consumers get lost in this world and trying to figure out what's actually going to help my skin versus what's going to maybe enhance the effects that I'm looking for rather than true treatment and the protocols we should be following. So without further ado, please welcome Jack Jia, who is the founder of Musely. Welcome, Jack. I'm so honored to host you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Edgar. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on because this is such an important conversation. And I think Musely, what you've established with Musely and the accessibility you've established is incredible. And I can't wait to dive into that. I really want to talk to you about, there's so many aspects, but this idea of like medical access and using technology to like bring this forward. I mean, I would love to kind of walk down memory lane if you could tell us what led to this idea and what made you want to create a platform like this.
Yeah, I think the whole journey was fairly accidental. I think the skincare need for something efficacious certainly has been always there, but we Muesli actually was a marketplace. We thought finding best skincare products was a curation problem, and there are good products out there, and just we have to try hard to find it. And this is back in probably 8, 9 years ago now, around 2017, 2018. So we built a marketplace. We used our corporate resource, built a marketplace with 900 best of breed skincare products, brands that are, and we were pushing it. And also had a little private agenda because my wife developed this condition since our son was born. And that at the time, it was already over 20 years. And
Hmm.
she had this condition called melasma, typically induced by pregnancy and childbirth, and then typically stays on with women for life. There are about 6 million women in the US with melasma. And she tried everything. She tried everything on the planet for hundreds of different creams. And then, for 20 years. And then last few years, she was trying laser, right? From the less expensive IPL laser to more expensive Fraxel, and nothing worked. Nothing actually worked, and her melasma got worse. So part of the building this marketplace is that there were several dozen dark spot correctors in our marketplace. We spent a lot of effort, studied their ingredients, and we thought this would work. And my wife tried those also, and it was no different than from the past. So nothing
Yeah.
really worked. So that was kind of the, oh my God, what's wrong? And that's how we start to look deeper into the industry, right? From outside, we just know that people keep trying different skincare products. People, my wife always bring in new things from some friends' recommendation over the years. But so what was the problem? That was kind of, we were stuck in 2018. We're stuck with this 900 skincare brands on our marketplace, and they were no different.
Mhm.
And so we got some expert to help us. And ironically, now our chief medical officer, Dr. Marie Jean, was brought in as a advisor. Maybe, she's a dermatologist, so she would know this. And she didn't even bother to look at any of the products. She just says, well, none of these 900 skincare products work. And I
Yeah.
said, well, Dr. Jin, you got to look at it a little bit and look at their ingredients, which we did. And she said, well, I've been practicing cosmetic dermatology for 25 years. I've done this research. I've seen it all, right? I have literally have dozens of women bringing whole bags of skincare products to my office every week for the last 25 years, and then asking the same question, right? And the initial first few years, I actually try to study them and just know they don't work.
Yeah.
And then I ask, so is there no solution for these conditions then? And she said, no, you have to go prescription. That was the first time I heard prescription cosmetics medication, right? We all know prescription for treating illness, but for these cosmetics conditions, there are actually treatment. The other two women actually shed even more insights. One is Lori Bush, who is the founding CEO of Rodan and Fields.
Mhm.
Another lady, Kimber Mazzarazzo, she was the EVP for Proactive at the time. And they both actually came out of those industry and with, 40 years of skincare product development, working for Neutrogena's and Johnson Johnson and a bunch of other companies in the past. So I thought, hey, you guys are from in the industries, and so you would know why can these big giants do something about efficacy.
Yeah.
Turned out that was actually even more insightful. And so the doctor knows they don't work, but they don't know why, right? And the industry folks says we are not allowed to work. It's not like we don't have chemists that understand what would work, right? But the
Yeah.
problem is if you put something topical on your skin, if that topical cream can interact with your skin cells, right? Do something good or bad, for goodness, treating wrinkles, dark spots, or for badness, causing illness or cancer. Either way, that's the very legal definition of a drug.
Yeah.
So the skincare products on the market are not allowed to make anything that would do something, right? So the bottom line is that these creams out there, whether it's a $10 cream or $600 cream, they're just moisturizers.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
nothing
Because
but
you can't make structural and function claims
no,
if
you
you're
cannot.
not a
You
drug.
cannot
Yeah.
make that claim, right? So, and the bigger the brand, the less likely they will be able to add ingredients that is remotely efficacious, right? The small brands may get away with adding stuff that nobody knows that's you know, but that's just generally as an industry, that's the very barrier. So that's why people try different things. There's every there are thousands of brands out there, right? Every celebrity has its own skincare brands because
Right.
it's just a marketing story. It's just scented water, we call them.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, really interesting what you shared because you brought up your wife's journey with melasma. I think that's such an incredible example because melasma is an actual skin condition. And so when we're talking about skin care, I mean, this also is something that's always on my radar. It's like, it's one thing, like, I think brands can tiptoe around that drug claim thing, but then when you're somehow indirectly claiming something works for something like melasma, you're still in that weird territory of like,
Yeah,
what are you
yeah.
really saying and what are you really promising to your consumers at the end of the day? I want to ask you, like, why do you think the beauty industry avoids talking about this reality and like diving deeper into these like really technical issues that are very much there, because I've heard this a lot. For example, I've heard a lot, well, there's no regulation in the United States for cosmetics. And I disagree. I think there is. I just think there's so many loopholes, at this point that I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there are definitely sort of regulations around this, right? So that's why the general skincare, cosmetic skincare product cannot make any kind of those claims, right? It can only, even for simple things like wrinkle fine lines, you can only say something, it can remove the appearance of wrinkles and fine line, but not really actually treating those underlying conditions, right? Those are great example, right? Melasma may be quasi kind of medical, but
Yeah.
insurance doesn't cover it because it's still considered to be cosmetics, right? Just makes your
Mhm.
face, these random dark spots. What's the big deal? That was kind of insurance companies, at least superficial justification. But there's a fundamental business model issue that we can get into that separately, why insurance doesn't cover these cosmetics conditions. But the reason industry cannot address it, it is because this is a giant industry, right? $300 billion worldwide industry for skincare. And they move a lot of stuff, right? The entire business model is built on, celebrity endorsement, supermodel paying. They definitely pay 10 times more to the supermodels than to the scientists who can actually do something about them, right? And then because the very regulation makes their business model not viable, so they're just selling moisturizer, different kind of moisturizer, make it different scent, telling stories around them. That's
Yeah.
why this is something that influencers can get into, celebrity can into it because they have a story to tell.
Yeah.
If you just need moisturizer, yeah, you can certainly buy any of those, right? But that's why if you ask dermatologists, the best moisturizer actually are the simplest one, right? The CeraVe's, the Vaseline, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
those are better moisturizer than the fancy, I won't name names, but the $300, $400, $500 ones.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the reality. There is an industry that they build around storytelling, around supermodel, around branding by itself, right? To almost like a fashion business where you wear these things to almost get achieve the fashion impact. But a lot of people do have real issues. That's where all these skincare products don't really do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, this is really interesting because you've also talked about something you called the giant burden of big pharma. Why do you think the pharmaceutical infrastructure struggles to innovate in areas like cosmetic dermatology or longevity?
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing is the big pharma was created, right, maybe 100 years ago,
Yeah.
right, to solve the problem of medication costs being very high,
Yeah.
right? So before that, it's actually all drugs are made through compounding, right? In every country, every culture for thousands of years, right? Small mom and pop shops creating mix of chemicals and then treating illness. That's kind of how, the drugs were made, right? Then, the countries got together and basically says, well, we need to regulate this. We need to make the drug cheaper so we can manufacturing large quantity of medications. And so that's how it was built, right? And in order to protect consumer, we want the safety. So that's why you have the modern way of drug discovery, which is a $2 billion journey, right? 10 years clinical trial, from phase 1 to phase 3. And then you get one drug, one formula, and you file patent and you protect for the next 25 years.
Right.
So even you are successful in that journey, you basically have one formula, spend a $2 billion, and no change for 35 years, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a good way to innovate, right? Innovation is supposed to be a iterative process, improving constant improvement. So there is no improvement in that model, and the
Right.
cost is also very high, the $2 billion. So it's not like a lot of people say big pharma are just super greedy, right? They are actually in some sense, to their defense, they have a $2 billion hole for that one drug that discovered, right? And oftentimes, not every drug will be super successful. So the one successful drug have to cover the loss of maybe two other drugs. So you're talking about $5-6 billion before they can make a dollar.
Yeah.
So therefore the drugs becomes really expensive. That's why drugs are so expensive. And so therefore, the drug must be covered by insurance. This is kind of the related problem, right? The current healthcare is really designed not for health. It's really designed for sickness. So,
Mm.
so you might
Yeah.
as well call it sick care system.
Yeah.
Our sick care system is designed to treat life-threatening conditions, right? It's
Yeah.
really, like 300 million Americans pull our money together to pay the healthcare, and then whoever got really sick can use that healthcare to cover the drug, right? So therefore, these big pharma, the $2 billion investment can be recovered, right? They really require $100,000 per month treatment, $1 million per month treatment, ideally, in order to recover that $2 billion investment, right? So that's why the drug is so expensive. It's not like the drug, the actual chemical itself is expensive. It's all the process, the regulation, all the costs incurred over long time. And so therefore, the current drugs business model, the healthcare model, is really for life-threatening condition. It's really for the sickness, right? And therefore, these cancer patients can, the insurance have to pay $1 million. Now, if you look at the industry in skincare or even in other wellness kind of conditions, it's just not designed by this current healthcare business model, right?
Yeah.
Like skincare is a condition, almost for everybody, right? Hair loss, menopause, longevity, all these conditions are really everybody's condition. Cosmetic condition is also everybody's. Wrinkles, fine lines is everyone's condition. And insurance, by definition, cannot cover it because if insurance covers everyone, they will go broke, right? So,
Yeah.
it's just, by nature is small minority, we pull our money together to cover minority conditions. That's what the insurance business model is all about. And the healthcare and all the big pharma was also designed to charge you a lot of money, right? The chemical itself is dirt cheap. The
Yeah.
whatever that charges $1 million for the cancer treatment, the actual margin is 99.999. How I don't know how many nines percent, but everything else, created the cost that they have to recover. That's kind of the fundamental problem, right? So
Yeah.
therefore there's no one actually use the modern science and medicine to treat non-life-threatening condition up to this point, right? So Musely decided, and maybe with a few other telehealth companies, is that we need to address the other side of the equation, which is wellness conditions, cosmetics conditions for everybody, for everyday person.
Yeah.
And the science is there, the medications are there, just
Right.
there's no big infrastructure to allow that to serve consumers.
It's very fascinating because I mean I love how you've explained this. Thank you for doing such a deep dive because when you think about pigmentation, hair loss, aging, all of these things, you're right, they kind of fall into a major gap in the system. But you know what's interesting is that we do have the drugs. And I think that's what like that's where I get lost too as a consumer is like we have the drugs, but like we stop promoting them and we get so involved with the skincare stuff where it's almost like, guys, we're treating pigment. There's a drug for this, like there's actually a solution here. Why aren't we, like, as consumers, shifting that focus? And so, I mean, I think it's a very interesting
Yeah,
space
it's
that
in
way,
fact the irony continues, the economic irony continues, right? One is this whole big pharma that I just mentioned, and
Yeah,
then the moment the drugs is out of pattern,
yeah,
right? They lose economic owner. So the big pharma no longer care about them. Right now, Ozempic is still being protected by patents, right? In a few more years, I think by 2031, in the US, patents expire. So Ozempic will become generic. Then all of a sudden, Novo is not going to care about them anymore, right? Novo Nordisk is going to move on to the next one. So
right.
all these other drugs that's old are no longer being promoted by anybody. There's no economic owners anymore. So that's actually 99% of the drugs.
Yeah, yeah,
And the ironic thing about these drugs are the safest drug because they've been around not just through clinical trial, they have been to actual usage for 30 years, 50 years, right? Tretinoin has been on the market for over 60 years,
right.
and it's the safest anti-aging, you know, medication, right? But there's really no one promoting tretinoin other than the industry generally at least got hold of this one drug, right? But that's
Yeah.
an exception, right? Even that is ironic. Even everybody's talking about tretinoin, right? The generic drug, non-branded generic tretinoin still has a list price of $400,
Wow.
right? It's crazy, right?
Yeah,
If you go to Costco, the pharmacy, you can get that drug, basically for $100. That's still too expensive because the chemical is absolutely dirt cheap. We're talking about cents for
yeah.
making that drugs that's right now Costco sells for $100, right? And that's just not right.
No, it's not right. And you know what's interesting? This actually gets brought up too, is like you look at some of these serums like retinol, retinaldehyde, bakuchiol, and they're selling them for $100, $200. And I'm like, guys, like,
I
like
know.
that's
I
conversion
know.
steps away from being,
And those retinol, right? Just since we're talking about science and chemical, right? Those
yeah,
non-prescription retinol, they're
yeah,
actually not the things that can directly help us on anti-aging, wrinkles, fine lines, because they're just pure vitamin A. Retinol is just AKA vitamin A, right? We
yes.
do not have receptors for vitamin A, right?
Hmm.
We have a receptor for in our skin cells, right, for third cousin of retinol, right, which
Right.
is tretinoin or retinoic acid, right? It requires multiple human enzymes and weeks of conversion in a lab tube, from to get a very small fraction, right? 5% typically of the retinol you put it on, right? But on our skin, those retinol doesn't stay on for 6 weeks, for example, and
Right.
therefore the conversion is very, very, very minimal, right? We're talking about 0.1%, 0.01% of
Yeah.
what you would get from a tretinoin, and therefore it doesn't really do much other than irritating your skin and making
Yeah.
you red and dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
but it's interesting. Yeah, I love that you said that. And I thank you for saying that because I've made that point once on social media. And I had some people come after me. I'm like, you guys, this is just math, like you're relying on your skin to convert a molecule into its active form, which there are three isoforms of receptors that will bind it. I mean, just think about that, like this is
yeah,
biology
it
at the
doesn't
end of the
stay
day.
on. We're not a lab tube. You can actually stay there for weeks before the conversion actually
Yeah.
happens.
And it's
And
it's different based on everybody. Everybody's skin is different. So if
yeah,
you're like maybe you have a deficiency in certain enzymes that will convert it. So like we don't
but
even
it
know
still
that.
doesn't happen that fast, right? Because the
Yeah.
cream can stay on for hours, maybe a day, and you wash it off, and then
Right.
it's gone, right? So then that part, the next day you put a new one, the cycle goes on, but it's this too short, right? That's kind of the problem,
Yeah, and
right?
then the efficacy, that's I think that's what gets me is that there are like now I'm watching the industry shift, right? Now people are saying we have to prove our efficacy. We have to prove our marketing. Okay, let's start with retinol. It's one of the most made products in skincare.
I
Every
know.
single brand
That's
has one.
why that's why even that is still marketing, largely marketing. There's a tiny little, truth to it, right? But that tiny little truth is too small to really make an impact, right? That
Yes,
that 0.1% conversion that maybe happens on your skin. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of studies on this. It's proven that's the case, right? It just takes gazillion time and longer and for it to be working at some level, right? It just you need to go prescription if you want the impact, right? That's the bottom line.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what, honestly, when I first discovered Musely, I think that's what really made me fall in love with the brand immediately was because one, it's accessible. I mean, you have mastered accessibility with the brand, which truly hats off to you. But also, you guys don't sugarcoat it. You just say like, this is what this does. Like, for example, if you want to get the tretinoin prescription, that's the anti-aging cream. That's the literal job of tretinoin. That's what it does, anti-aging. And I'm pointing this out because when we're making marketing claims about certain things, you have to have the data to make those claims.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
really, technically, if you're talking about anti-aging, tretinoin is the molecule that's the most studied for anti-aging. So
yeah,
everything else
absolutely.
doesn't make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the good thing is when you start to compound, we have to compound because, and then we end up making cocktails, right? Then you can
right,
add other ingredients to make tretinoin more, tolerable, for example, or
yeah,
less side effect, right? Side effect is known, right? More than 50. If you use pure form of tretinoin, 50% of people have severe side effect, right? And so we can create this cocktail. So we may use the standard, whatever vodka, making the cocktail, but we add a bunch of other things to make it much more tolerable, even more efficacious, oftentimes, right? We have active and inactives, both are working together. And then we evolve our formula. So our cocktails are not fixed. So we've been doing this for almost 7 years now, right? The day one formula is changing. So
yeah,
our doctors, our practitioners are working with our chemists and pharmacists together, right? In a forever iterative loop to
right.
improve these formulas. We have 130 some formulas in our product portfolios, but these has been evolving, changing on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And then we introduce new formulas or new treatments, you know, typically 4 to 6 per year. So that's why we have 28 different major treatments. Started with just the dark spots, really for my wife. My wife was the first patient. We call her patient zero.
Yeah,
And then literally, she she did not believe this would work because she tried everything on the planet, right? So for 20, at the time, 23 years, and just nothing worked. So why would this be any different? And then after, I think 1 month, you know, 4 to 6 weeks, her melasma was completely gone. I mean,
Wow.
that was shocking, right? And she became kind of the first model in some sense. And then I thought her experience was unique, but turned out that at least 90 to 95% of our patients in melasma have exactly the same experience. I tried everything else, and the kitchen sink, start to blend things on their own, right? Literally start to put coffee with green teas, with cucumbers on the face, and hopefully to get rid of these dark spots, right? Internet had a lot of these recipes, and nothing worked, right? Nothing worked until muesli. That's kind of the recurring stories and over, just because I mean, it's not like we are so secretive. We figured out something unique. Our doctor knew this formula. Our chief medical officer, no, but they couldn't even make it, right? Even as a board certified dermatologist, could not compound, right? And could
Yeah.
not compound cheaply, right? Some of the offices used to compound with the little compounding machine and to make these because there's no big pharma helping them, right? Again, as I
Right.
said, there's no tools. They even know what tool to use, but no one makes the tool for them to use. That's kind
Right.
of the irony of the industry.
Well, that's why I find your background to be really, really interesting, Jack, because you're coming from the technology infrastructure and that kind of technical background. And I find that to be wonderful for something like this because you were essentially able to solve a problem, I think, from the lens of just, I mean, we've talked about the accessibility, but just the technical components that go into making a system like this work? And I want you to talk about that in terms of like your experience and how that shaped the way you built Muesli from the ground up. Like, what were some of those, like, maybe tell us some of your war stories, in the early days. Like, what were some of the things you had to kind of figure out and like walk through and, really put your brain power behind to see how this would come together?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
first problem we try to solve, we thought the first order problem was definitely seeing a dermatologist in order to get the prescription, right? So our
Yeah.
chief medical officer is a board certified, she's actually local in the Bay Area. And well, my wife actually went to see her in order to prescribe the first, she was the patient zero before our compounded formula was even made, with the branded bottle, right? But that was sort of too expensive, right? Too hard, takes a lot of time, and the average wait time for board, for dermatologists is 6 weeks. Even if you have them are in the neighborhood, a lot of the neighborhood don't even have dermatologists.
Yeah.
So that was too difficult. So building telehealth is something we didn't know. So the war story for us is that we have to, none of our engineers, we were building this marketplace app, right? But we have no idea what the telehealth looked like. And thank
Hmm.
God it was brand new. So everyone can learn from the ground up, right? Literally, we have to, spend probably 3, 4 months to learn how to build it. We initially thought that we can license something, but we quickly realized there's nothing really truly available. There's a couple of other folks maybe have pieces of the equation, but they really don't have the full system because it's so new. So we end
Yeah.
up, you know, so we have a culture at Musely is just called DIY, is do it yourself. And
Hmm.
that culture turned out helped us quite a bit because it's such a new market nascent sort of space. We end up have the time and the space to learn and build it. And so we end up building the best telehealth system. Our patient records, we have to be HIPAA compliant. Even we don't take insurance, we took the high standard of, security and then compliance, and all that has to be learned. So that was kind of the first battle. The second battle was really making the drug inexpensively, right? So the compounding was, and there were some compounding shops, but mostly are mom and pop shops. There are a lot of them actually in the US, like at the time, it was over 10,000 compounding pharmacies.
Hmm.
Um, but they're just doing compounding drugs for neighborhoods. And
Yeah.
so the model we use is called 503A, which is the doctor write a prescription first. Based on the prescription, the pharmacist will compound the medication for you, right? It's not like going to CVS, there's manufactured drugs available.
Right.
So it's very manual, very custom made, personalized. You would think that's very expensive. It is very expensive when we first started out, but it's still relatively inexpensive compared with the big pharma drugs. But then once we start to scale, we realized that entire industry was just too old. We have to use technology to reinvent it.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example, right? The standard, this 10,000 compounding pharmacy, the standard dispensing software they use for compounding is written in Microsoft DOS. So in order to have our machine running there, we had to find even DOS to run, and then we put the software on it.
Yeah.
Right, well, that's crazy, right? It's so that means we have to reinvent that. So our engineering team had to learn how the dispensing model works and rewrote that software in modern stack, right, of software.
Yeah.
And so we initially written in Java, then we first even further modernize it. And then in that entire process, right, because every single drug has to be compounded, started with pharmacists telling the technician how to do it, and then
Yeah.
all the drugs made has to be checked. Every single bottle has to be physically checked by a pharmacist, right, with
Yeah.
their names on it, on the label, right? So it's very, very personal down to. So that's a very manual process. So we, in order to increase efficiency and scale, we have to make software helping that process. So we introduce, for example, QR code scan so that the technicians and the doctors and the pack and ship people can work in a very seamless way. We have to introduce many mini lines of production, right? Because these are not factory kind of thing, but we can still when we fill the pills, right? We have we have some hair pills, we have the longevity pill called the age well pill, and they
Mhm.
are individually made. And those pill machines are very miniaturized for a technician to work on, this small line, right? So because they were literally prescription already written. So today we have, let's say, 100 bottles of the age well pill for 100 different patients, right? They
Yeah.
can they can still automate this with technology, but at a very simple, customized, personalized fashion, right? So this whole notion of then all of these are freshly made, so therefore the medications are more potent when they're fresh, right?
Yeah.
So we have this notion of from farm to table, from farm pharmacy farm to individual homes. So even in that farm to table model, we can make it so much cheaper, so much more affordable than the big pharma, massively produced with billions of pills produced at the same time, right? We're still
Yeah.
probably 1,000 times, 100 times, 10 times, depends on what drugs, cheaper
Yeah.
than those kind of
No, that's what I
manufacturers.
think that's what blows me away is that everything's so affordable on Musely. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's really, really amazing.
Yeah,
Like
pretty much everything we try to keep it $1 a day, right? $1 a
yeah,
day is sort of the mantra.
yeah.
And we used to compare with it's a cup of coffee, but now you can't get a cup of coffee for $1. The coffee is now $3, $4 a cup.
I don't think they're selling coffee anywhere for $1 anymore.
I know
Yeah.
that was kind of what changed in the last 7 years.
Yeah. No, this is, I mean, it's really fascinating to me, I think, for so many reasons, right? Because the price point thing really matters at the end of the day. And I think this is where, when I look at Muesli, I don't just see, okay, these are like skin health solutions. I also, from my perspective, I'm looking at it from like if a physician is looking at this model, this makes the job of a physician, I think, a lot more simplified. If you're a new dermatologist, for example, you want to give your patients the most access that they can get. And it's a hard conversation to have. I've had that conversation, both on the patient side as well as the other side, where it's like when a prescription costs $500. Like I know the classic example of this was Ozempic, right? When Ozempic first came out, people were being quoted like $500, $600, for one pen, like, or
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
that. I
one
think it
pen.
was
Yeah,
like, yeah, like 1200 or something crazy.
yeah.
And then to have that conversation for any, I think, practitioner is very disheartening because you don't go into medicine trying to sell people ridiculously high prescriptions. Nobody wants that. There's not a single medical professional that's like happy about that scenario,
No, not
And
at all.
so,
I mean, Ozempic is a great example. Is the traditional big pharma crossed the line to a consumer wellness business almost, right? That's
yeah,
by accident, right? It was definitely a diabetes drug, right? It's
yeah,
almost out of patent. It's been there for a long time, right? It's been there for 20 some years. And
yeah,
for some country like China, Ozempic patents already expired. All right,
yeah,
so it's been that long, right? And just was recent in the last few years, all of a sudden, oh my God, this for weight loss is great. And they're really adjusting. If you look at the stock price for Novo Nordisk in the last few years, they even with this massive adoption, acceptance, consumer wellness usage, their stock didn't go up that much because this is not their business model. Selling
Yeah.
it cheap, right? It's not that cheap right now. Still 200, even the pills are still $200 a month, right? The shots, the needles are still, $400, $500. And still they're having hard time making a lot of money. Even they're making a lot of money, but they're relatively to their business model, it's not the best business cases. But this is one of those crossover happened. Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, that's why this fundamental business model for wellness is not really, generally speaking, they don't exist. And that's why we have to learn how to vertically integrate, in our case, with dermatologists and OBGYN doctors, since we got into the HRT, menopausal conditions, and even longevity, functional medicine,
Yeah.
and that kind of a discipline, medical. And then with the pharmacists who can compound, chemists who can formulate. Then we
Yes.
have to also understand chemical industry. That's also a very old, very inefficient business. I mean, you're talking about like traditional wholesaler, reseller. Like I remember in the 90s, like, to get car fixed, you have to buy some parts. There was no
Yeah.
direct to consumer business, and you have to go through these layers of complexity. Same thing happening still in the chemical industry. So we have to break through all of that layers to get the chemical dirt cheap, right?
Yeah.
Ourselves, right? And then by vertically integrating these, and you can create the best cocktail, and you can improve the best cocktail, and never done, right? That's kind of the and that we now certainly start to, especially for the menopausal conditions, given our women naturally gets into that age. Our the aging condition happens the middle age anyway. So that was already squarely in that demo where just most of the women didn't know HRT should be considered, right? It was a taboo topic until three
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
And so thank God that change, in realization of this faulty study from 25 years ago, this women's health initiative that was just wrong, right? Misguided the entire society and the women and who are not seeking treatment for these conditions. That's massive, massive conditions, right? The menopausal condition have 20, 25, 28 symptoms that we've been tracking, right? Most of them are
Yeah.
actually to do with,
It's a whole area of study just figuring this out.
I
Like,
know, I know.
yeah.
And the top few actually turn out to be dermatological related, right? It's a skin,
Yes.
it's a hair, it's nail
Yeah.
change, of course, the mental health and hot flush, and you name it, right? And now we know why. I mean, actually, our medical director for this field, HRT, and is a OBGYN doctor from Stanford, right?
Yeah.
She been want to help her patients for 20 some years also. Even when this WHI study came out, she knew
Yeah.
it was wrong, but she couldn't say anything because that's, NIH study. So therefore, we have to follow. And so now for the last few years, she's just on a mission, right? So that's, thank God we got a platform. She now can formulate the best HRT treatment and most affordable treatments, and for women to really treat these conditions, these conditions that shouldn't be there, really shouldn't women shouldn't be suffering in their 40s and 50s, and that's really it's a shame.
Well, that's also why I think a platform like Musely and this level of accessibility is so profound on multiple levels. So even but let's move past just the fact that we're getting access to prescriptions. Let's move past that, right? And talk about how we're getting access to information that's indirectly coming out through interventions like this that are now accessible. I mean, women didn't even know for the longest time that this could help me. Like that information wasn't even out there. Like now, when I see the social media conversation around hormone replacement, anything, right? Skin changes that you go through in menopause, perimenopause, it's a brand new conversation because it's like almost like discovering a new field of medicine. That's what it feels
Yeah,
like.
that's
And
right.
when you look at it from that lens, it's like, oh my God, like these things were right in front of our face and we never even considered them as options for women. And so, I mean, also, I want to say this about, like you had brought this up, like the compounding part of it, like tretinoin, for example, right? Tretinoin, I use Musely's tretinoin. That's my choice. And I love it. Absolutely love it. Mine is compounded with niacinamide and hyaluronic acid. It's amazing. The problem that that solved for me as a consumer was it gave me the ability to stick to it, the consistency part. And I think that's a huge conversation as well, right? Because most people, when you talk about something like tretinoin, their biggest complaint is it's too much, it spreads very thick. I can't get it on my face. And then they don't stick to it. So they believe that pharma is failing them, drugs are failing them because these aren't old or dated or in whatever. But that's not true. It's that we have to rethink that. And so I'm kind of superimposing this, the examples, but it's the same thing with women's health, where it's like I feel like for the longest time we felt like these are inaccessible treatments, but they're not inaccessible. They just need to be framed in a way that you feel comfortable approaching a doctor wanting to get them. So, I want to get your opinion on that because I think that requires a cultural shift to happen, in the consumer space. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is blocking that cultural shift from really taking place in a very robust way where we are all getting
Yeah,
on board,
yeah. That's a great question, and it's
Yeah.
something we talk a lot about also internally,
Yeah.
because traditionally medication has been considered, again, as I said, the traditional model has educated the consumer is for illness.
Hmm.
I don't take meds unless I'm sick,
Yeah.
right? That is right for certain kind of conditions, but it's not right with the modern science understanding, right? So this is what we do, right? The science behind this is, I mean, I would say it's to be fair to a lot of the people. A lot of the science really behind this thing is matured in the recent 10-20 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff was not available, right? We didn't understand DNA. We didn't understand the cellular structure. We didn't understand a lot of the interactions. There were not a lot of studies. Muesli have done a lot of meta studies. We don't do original study, that takes too long, but we've
Yeah.
done a lot of meta studies on really what has truly worked, what doesn't work. So the fundamental shift is that we need to treat medicine like the true supplement for our
Yeah.
health, right? Not just to treat illness, right? If you draw this square, half of them is for life-threatening conditions. That's fine. You have cancer treatment. The other half is wellness, and this is the science, right? The fundamental science is we peak produce every chemical we need as a healthy person in our 20s, right? Late 20s is we every chemicals we need to keep us healthy is produced 100% at that age.
Right.
From that there on, we're on a very slow downhill decline, right,
Yeah.
of producing these chemicals. So, for example, the muesli medications out of these 130 some formulas, most of the medications are either 100% bioidenticals or very close to bioidentical chemicals.
Hmm.
And therefore, these are the things as we age, we start to lose a lot of them, right? Then when we talk about HRT, it was a great example, right? The estrogen loss for women starts at late 30s, right? Early 40s, around 40 years old, plus minus, depends on individual. That estrogen loss will go through a 10-year cycle from 100% to down to 1% left, right?
Yeah.
99% loss in
Yeah.
10 years. Imagine the change of the human, within with that chemical gone, right, completely, right. That's why there's so many conditions, side effect, produce, and it's not necessarily a healthy thing, right. Why we would lose estrogen, why women will lose estrogen. I mean, there's a biological reason, evolutionary reason why that happens, but it's
Yeah.
not healthy, right. And the same thing with hair loss, right?
Yes.
For hair thinning, women don't lose hair completely, right? Like men, because the hair follicles are largely killed by testosterone, right? And women have smaller amount, so therefore, about 10% of the man's testosterone right? So therefore, it's not potent enough to kill all the hair follicles. But why would testosterone kill hair follicles? What's the reason? Nobody knows why that happens, but it's just one of those things. It's a mystery of life. Um, but to prevent that from happening, right, you need protections. You need DHT kind of chemicals to really help to protect the hair follicle being killed. So there are chemicals. We naturally produce them when we're really young. We start to lose them. Both men and women start to lose them. And so therefore, we can add them, whether it's topical hair solutions or eat pills, and they will protect from hair thinning or hair loss in women's case. And the same thing goes into longevity, right? Longevity, we start to lose. I mean, I'm in that age now, right? That you massively lose almost all the chemicals that to keep you healthy. That's why the last 20 years of Americans or anybody, right? But at least American, you can quantify the age, right? So 80 years old
Right.
is kind of the lifespan. From 60 and onward, that last 20 years, 80% of the Americans are not healthy anymore, right? They are no
Yeah.
longer, why they're not healthy? Because they lack of these basic chemicals to keep them healthy, right? These
Right.
chemicals are not your supplements. You can't just take vitamins and to get them back, right? These
Yeah.
are by law medications. These are bioidentical chemicals that we need to keep us healthy,
Right.
right? And so we recently introduced the longevity pill. One of the first one is called the Core Foundation. Is really about energy production. It's called the Age Well pill.
Mhm.
I have had this back pain, right? Just like typical older people since I was 50 years old, right? For over 10 years, if I sit on the chair for half an hour, if I stand up, I would just can't stand straight, right? I'm bended a little
Yeah.
bit, right? And you see a lot of old people, they walk kind of bended. I start to feel I'm gonna become that if I don't do something, but I couldn't. I run, I exercise, I do all the healthy things. I still cannot reproduce some of the chemicals that I had. And so
Right.
until this pill, right? The pill basically have chemicals to help you to increase your mitochondria cellular energy production. So
Mhm.
it's at the core, at the furnace level, right? You end up having more energy, and therefore everything else becomes better. It has anti-inflammatory chemicals. It has, helping your metabolism, and so all of that makes your core better, right? So this is, our doctors, our scientists, basically said first we need to cure the core. If you have a good foundation, good bones, then your health will improve. Then we
Right.
can individually target other parts of the body, right? And I don't know, I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but we will have a skin pill, a oral pill for skin health from within, right?
Mhm.
Literally repairing your cellular damage from UV, right?
Yeah.
It's unlike like a sunscreen. You protect UV from damaging, but what will still get UV in, right? There will be damaged cells, and the
Right.
skin pill can repair that and make your skin better within, right? So that's kind of the one area, right? Certainly we'll have pills for heart, for brain, for guts. I mean, those are all chemicals we need, especially we need as we age, as we become
Right.
older. We just don't have them anymore. And therefore, these cells start to become malfunctioning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a very, very compelling argument that you've made here. And I think that's so, so well rooted in the science and the physiology of it, because no one really wants to talk about this. I personally love longevity, and I've been very up to date on reading all the papers that come out. And one thing that I keep seeing that we're missing the point on is kind of what you alluded to just now, which is there are certain chemicals, molecules that are naturally depleting, but then also we are also failing to replete them in the standard ways. So, like, for example, I'll tell you, vitamin D is a big one. I don't know what the stats are right now, but I do remember a few years back there was some data about like the percentage of people in the United States that have a deficiency in vitamin D. And then that led to all sorts of theories, and people were blaming sunscreen and, all sorts of crap. And, so it's like, but that is a prime example, right? Because vitamin D is at the center of so many cellular functions, but we don't get to focus on that. We focus more on, well, what could have caused this? No, it's just your body's natural way. Like that's what happens
Yeah, yeah. It's just that
physiologically
as we age, we start to lose our ability to, produce vitamin D,
to
right? You can
synthesize it.
argue, yeah, you should go
Yeah.
in the sun more, but the problem is the sun can cause a lot of damages at the same time, while maybe producing a little more vitamin D, but still not enough. That's the
Yeah.
problem, right? That's the problem. Still may still not be enough. And a
Yeah.
lot of these other chemicals are very difficult to reproduce because just the clock is ticking, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the mechanism of action is very interesting, very unique. And, there have been a recent study on this. I mean, this is studies pretty well known now, right? Even as we get into the old age, 60, 70, 80, our DNA itself, right, is still fully intact,
Yeah.
right? It's really the epigenome that controls the DNA on and off that goes haywire as we
That's
age,
right.
right? And
Yeah.
and how to make the epigenome function, healthy again, reset it, reboot it, right? Is really part of the trick, right? We're doing a lot of the biohacking is all about that, right? But really figure out what's working, what's not working. So when we introduced the age well pill, there's only 5 ingredients in it,
Mm.
right? And we started with probably 150 chemicals that people claim that has worked, right? But when you chase it down to the actual study, right? Is this a placebo-controlled study? Is their sample large enough? The impact truly are noticeable, right? When you put all those filter and Kong into it, there's less and less chemicals. That's why we only need these 5. And for me, my pains are, I mean, after suffering for 10 years, it was
Yeah.
gone after really just a few weeks of taking it. And I had foot pains. I used to play a lot of soccer and I just couldn't do it anymore. And
Yeah.
I ended up only playing golf. I even walking start become painful. I don't want to ride a car. I was like, when I'm gonna, how long can I hold on to this, my foot pain, right? It's like all of a sudden now it's completely gone, right?
Wow.
Completely gone. It was just like, oh my God, this is like, for me, this is the miracle pill. I may be less
Yeah.
caring about the skincare like my wife, but this is for me. It was like, okay, I'm like young again, feels like.
No, but it's amazing because that's the definition of preventative care is what you're describing. I mean, this is, in my opinion, the future of preventative care. It doesn't have to be complex. It just needs to be efficacious, and we have to understand the molecules that are at play and what they do and how they reset your body.
Yeah,
I had Jack, I had this conversation. I don't remember it. It's been a while, but the idea came up of physiological feedback loops, and that was an important conversation because when you look at physiology and the way it functions, we lose the capacity of these loops to do what they're supposed to do, which is tell our cells, hey, you're lacking this, make less, or, or make more, or whatever, right? So the feedback loops themselves get completely hijacked as we age. If we are able to introduce certain molecules and certain things that can replenish that system, you're replenishing the whole machine at the
yeah,
end of the
yeah. They
day,
create a whole feedback system. That's why I'm
Yeah,
not a big fan of the functional health thing, right? But I think there's absolutely some truth to it, right?
yeah,
Even just I experience, I feel like I'm young. When I'm walking now, I want to run because I feel
yeah.
like I got the energy. I want to bounce now all of a sudden, right? That feeling, I haven't had it for, again, 10, 20 years, 10, 15 years.
Wow. Well, I love it, and I am such a fan of what you've created. I can't rave enough about it. I think I've recommended, like I said before, we even decided to do this podcast. I've been recommending Musely
Well,
to my friends.
I thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah,
No, I mean it's deserved though. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like people ask the questions, right? Every day you're getting the most basic questions of where can I go get a prescription for my hyperpigmentation? Where can I go and get solutions? It's like, here you go. It's right
yeah,
here.
yeah. I
So
don't know if you know this. I was surprised to got a notice 3 weeks ago from USA Today. We
yeah.
won the most trusted brand in the
Wow.
US. I mean, actually, it's a global brand voting by the Americans, right? And it was like 20, 30,000 people participated in this completely independent study, right, with no brands being involved, right? We're
Mhm.
ranked number 7 in the health and beauty space, right? And in our space, so it's really the all the other brands were very old, your CeraVe, your
Yeah.
Neutrogena brands, right?
Yeah.
Because the way they had the consumer surveyed it, right? 20, 30,000 people being surveyed it, and it's just asking uh, two important questions. Would you buy this yourself again? And
Hmm.
would you recommend refer this to people you care, right? Friends and family. And
Right.
those are the 40% weight on each. And then somehow Musli got surfaced, right? I don't think we technically were too young to belong to, like, Oakley is actually one of the beauty brands listed
Yeah.
there. But what you said is true. Yeah, when you focus on really what makes the efficacious medications and for wellness, everything else will just follow, right? We have this internally, we have this principle. Our drug is not cancer, treating, because for them, life-threatening conditions, so even 30% efficacy is fine, because if someone is dying from a cancer, 30%
Yeah.
chance is better than no chance, right? We have a 80-80 rule. Minimally, you need to be 80% efficacious for 80% of the people. Otherwise, we would not introduce a medication because it's not universally
It's not
good
worth it.
enough.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
universally accepted. No,
yeah,
I love that. I think this is the future. I think what you've created and what your team is doing, I mean, this is the future. And I see skincare merging more into this understanding that we cannot lie and we have to stop following the marketing. We have to follow the science. There
yeah,
is no
totally.
substitute to that, you know? And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
no,
Yeah.
I'm
This
a
is not
huge
a
fan.
fashion business. This is not
No,
color cosmetics, which is fine. You can, whatever you feel good, look good, right? This needs to have results.
yes.
That's the only thing that matters.
And that's the thing is like we are having this conversation in the cosmeceutical space where we're talking about things are merging with dermatological science. You know, cosmetics is coming, but at the end of the day, the efficacy has to speak. That's the bottom line. And if we ignore that, we're going to keep spiraling in this, gray zone that we've been in with cosmetics. It's just that needs to stop. I mean, if you ask
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opinion, it needs to stop.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
needs to stop. I mean, the funny thing is that because we created a whole ecosystem through this DIY model, we have our own healthcare system, right? Patient record system. We have our e-nurse. We have recently we actually use AI to further harvest the data that we have, right? We have,
Yeah.
you know, uh, 10 million data points from these patients, right? 1.2 million patients gave us data, what works, what doesn't, which formula, down to
Mm,
every single formula. If you
mm,
look at each formula, the number of, I mean, this is not even like a traditional clinical trial study. You survey them. They literally are using the e-nurse to help their treatment. So they're using their action to tell us, is this improving, not improving, right? They're not even answering a question for us. They're just helping themselves along the way.
yeah.
Even the most least used, actually, the least used formula have thousands of people behind it in terms of efficacy,
Wow.
impact. At what point? At day 7, day 30, day 60, day 90? What are the impact? How much impact? Right? We have all the data. Right. This is, in some sense, I don't think there is another place with this much data for skincare, and
Yeah.
now with hair care, and hair care for women mostly, and then HRT is catching up quickly, and longevity is kind of the new frontier. And yeah, I think the Stanford, which is the 5 minutes away from my home, their
Yeah.
dermatology department is probably smaller than us in terms of how many board certified dermatologists practicing, and they're also participating in the medication development and improvement at the same
Wow.
time, right? So the practitioner is not just using the tool, they're improving the tool.
Yes, that's huge. That's really huge. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about this. I mean, it's truly a breakthrough in skin science, and I have not enough words to praise what you've created.
Oh,
I
thank
think,
you. I
yeah, I
really
mean, it's
appreciate
it's
that.
the truth. I really think this will change this industry, and for all of our listeners, you guys gotta follow the efficacy, follow the science. That's what I try to tell everybody. Follow result-oriented, result-driven skincare. That's when you will be voting with your dollars and you will stop buying marketing, at the end of the day. And so thank you so much, Jack. This has been an honor to host you and to learn from you.
Yeah, thank you, Edka. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your program. I always love your program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.